Now Micah Miller trying to spring a pass ahead. Nobody in front of Jack Paling. Moves on with a blast and scores! Jack Paling with
We aren't giving up on chances, and we just got to bottom line execute.
Waits, passes in front. Great save, Pelosi, as she robs a Gopher in front of her. And that was number 8, Kippen Keller, on the grade A opportunity.
For me as a coach, that's the kind of D you're always looking for, because they don't grow on trees for sure. And he's done a really good job being a captain of a really young team this year.
It was a really cool thing to see for them to really appreciate what I've done on and off the ice.
to the far half wall. Jack Paling trying to play it into the corner. Now Paling turns, squares his body to the slot, sends it up high toward Jack. A shot makes its way through, and they score! Right along the blue line, Nick Paling was in front of the net, and St. Cloud State's got a lead here in the
And welcome back to the Den, Huskies Warming House podcast fans. It is episode number 28. A former St. Cloud State associate head coach will join us later in the show. There's plenty of NHL and college hockey news to dive into. But Noah Grant joining me from North Dakota, Nick Maxon here in the Twin Cities. It is a very cold and rainy Saturday morning here. And Noah, it's a good day for hockey in a sense, but at the end of it, man, I still, the Stanley Cup playoffs are coming to an end, so I'm a little sad because it's now the conference finals, and there's going to be a little bit of a break coming up. But overall, I mean, there's been some pretty good hockey been played over the last couple of weeks. How's things been going for you so far?
Yeah, it's going to be weird to see what they call spooky season in October is going to look like. It's going to be way different than what we're used to. We might have an NHL draft at the tail end of that. I mean, it's a very interesting time. Obviously, we got some college hockey news to get into, some Minnesota Wild news that we're going to touch on today too, which should be really exciting because I'm a little bit triggered. I'm a little bit triggered by this one and the reaction of some fans. So we're going to get to that one after we have our interview, which our interview was absolutely awesome. So you know what? I'm doing all right. I was in quarantine for about 12 hours on Thursday.
Pretty easy to do in North Dakota.
Yeah. Natural. But no, I mean, it was a little bit different. I work Monday, Thursday, and Friday. So I hadn't been to work, of course, because of the holiday. Well, it turns out when we tested at the college last Friday that one of my close coworkers had tested positive. No one told me about it, which is kind of scary. But when I, came home, I was quarantined pretty much in my room and that sort of thing. And then found out on Friday it was actually a false positive. So that's a really nice relief with having parents that are older. So I mean, I'm doing all right. It's a Saturday. It's way too freaking early for this still, man. I woke up this, oh my goodness. Like our fans, we love you so much, but 7 o'clock is tough love. It is.
We need to get like a coffee sponsor or something like that. That would be fantastic. No, let's move into the opening draw because we do have some housekeeping procedures that we need to get to touch on. One of them is because of the schedule change that started last week. We need to touch on some trivia stuff. I'll let you take care of that because we have to announce last week's winner and then also talk about this week as well.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to jump right into that. Before we do, real quick here, just want to mention our road to 300, as we call it, 300 followers on Twitter and 100 followers on Facebook. We're getting closer, people, but we're not quite there. We've gained about 110 followers, and we need about 40 left in Twitter, which on our good days, that's about what we've gotten for a single day record. So that'd be awesome to see us. We'd love to be able to announce the winners, I think, live on the show, be able to do a drawing and pull people's names out. So you can see that we weren't biased, I think would be the biggest thing. But I mean, you got to think about it. So tell your friends and family to follow the Twitter page, because I think probably at least a third of our followers have got to be St. Cloud State, podcasts, that sort of thing. So they're not going to win, right? Because they're not people. They're organizations. So if you think about it, once we get to 300 followers, there's maybe about 150, potential people to pull from. So tell your friends, tell your family, and win some cool merch, man. We're excited to give it away.
Speaking of merch, Noah, before we go into the trivia, we have listened. There has been some outreach to us in terms of purchasing either a hat or a T-shirt. We have heard you folks, and we're trying to figure out exactly what we might do with that. We're still kind of figuring out if there's an avenue for it and what that might look like. So it's a work in progress. Stay tuned. And if we make an announcement on that, we'll certainly let the folks know about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, not to sugarcoat it, we need more followers. We need more people that want some of those T-shirts. So we're really excited about that. We're really to see our product be able to grow because of all of our fans. I know we say it every week, but it's just mind blowing sometimes to be able to wake up, albeit at 6:45 in the morning, to be able to do this. It's absolutely awesome. But with that, Nick, let's jump into our two-line fan trivia. Of course, two-line fan trivia, your chance to win one of these sweet Huskies Warming House hats presented or made by Unreal, I should say, every Saturday at noon. So let's jump right into it.
Two-line fan trivia is your chance to win. Follow the Huskies Warming House podcast on Twitter at Warming House Den. A new question will be asked every week. Be the first to tweet us the correct answer. Winners will be mentioned on the show, as well as a chance for prizes and more. One question, one answer, one winner. It's two-line trivia.
All right, so Nick, two-line fan trivia. This one came as a women's hockey question because last episode, episode 27, we had the associate coaches for the women's hockey team, former Olympians, Janelle Sergey and Molly Engstrom on. Go check that one out. It was a lot of fun. And we have some women's hockey guests coming on for episode 29 next week as well. So getting our women's hockey fix, which is awesome. So in their time with Badger women's hockey, Molly Engstrom was a Patty Kazmaier finalist, and Janelle Sergey was a WCHA all-rookie team member, among a lot of other accolades. Which member of our last year's 2019-20 St. Cloud State women's hockey team was also a WCHA women's hockey all-rookie member? Nick, do you happen to know?
I believe, wasn't that Klara Himlarova?
Klara Himlarova is correct. Carl Tillison at Husky16350 was our winner. Himlarova 12 had an incredible season with over 20 points as a freshman for the women's hockey team. She's from Opava, Czech Republic, earning the WCHA women's hockey all-rookie honors. Nick, do you know the last Husky with that honor by chance?
Ooh.
You know. It was in 2018, so.
Was it Paluzny?
It is Emma Paluzny. Which really isn't that surprising.
No, it shouldn't be that surprising, no.
I'm actually, I guess I'm surprised that I don't know if she's made the list. I didn't go farther back than 2018 because I typed the question, but I wouldn't be shocked, or maybe I would be. I feel like Laura Kluge should be a part of that list too, because Klara Himlarova was the other freshman. Now to come close, I believe Laura Kluge had 24 points as a freshman, and Himlarova finished with 23, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds about right. I might want to check that.
Yeah, but either way, I mean, it's just fantastic to see, you know, a freshman group, especially like the one for the women's hockey team last year, jump in and make such an impact. You know, with Himlarova, Olivia Savard, who's got a cannon of a shot, and then the new incoming freshman class, which of course we talked with our two guests last week about. I don't know. I think everybody just sleeps on this, you know, on watching this women's hockey team. And I know they haven't had the seasons that they had hoped for, you know, in the past couple of years, but they're getting goaltending. They're starting to get some offense. They're starting to put it all together. I'm excited. I hope there's a season this year because I think this team is really going to surprise a lot of people. And of course, now 8 teams in the WCHA with the addition of St. Thomas. So a little bit more parity in that group. And I think you're going to see even more parity as the Huskies women's hockey team continues to compete.
That's right, Noah. Women's hockey team should be a fun team to watch. And with that being said, Noah, let's jump right into some of this week's Center Ice View news and notes.
Center Ice View news and notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
And definitely some news to talk about today, Mr. Noah Grant. The big news, obviously, centers around the NCAA Division I men's hockey. Collectively, the 11 conferences came out and said that they were delaying the start of the season till at least November 20th. Now, a couple of tidbits here that's, you know, been out there. There were 2 things that were missing. One that's really good and one that's really bad, right? One that's really good is that they didn't say that the season was canceled. On the second part, they also didn't say that they were playing. All they simply said was we're delaying the start of the season to at least that time. That doesn't mean that the conferences will be starting on that date. They could certainly start later. They could start on the 20th, but they actually didn't announce that they were starting. They didn't actually officially announce they were playing. This is a developing story for our followers, and we will certainly be trying to get some more information, especially from Josh Fenton, who was on our podcast earlier in the last couple of episodes, to try to keep you up to date as much as we can with this story. It is still developing, and anything that continues to come from it will keep everybody in the mention. We will be talking about Nick Bjugstad and that Minnesota Wild trade after our Healthy Scratch interview. Noah, so just a little tease for our fans there. But let's talk about another former Wild player, Mikael Granlund, who had a kind of a down season in Nashville, and he said he would be testing the waters of free agency. At least for me, this shouldn't come as a surprise. It just didn't seem like he was a good fit in Nashville.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only reason I really wanted to address it, and also going back to the NCHC topic too, first of all, I don't think any of us are surprised, and it really only pushes the season, if it does happen to start on November 20th, back about 40 to 45 days from what we're originally accustomed to. So just to give people a little bit of a time frame if you don't really pay attention to the exhibition games and that sort of thing. Anyway, around that time, though, might be free agency for the NHL as they look for their December start. And Mikael Granlund might be wearing a different sweater. And the reason I bring this up is because I think a fair amount of people are hoping that maybe he'll come back to Minnesota. I don't see it, simply just because where are you going to put him? You know, especially with the addition of Nick Bjugstad, which we'll touch on later in this show. Yeah, where do you put him? I mean, honestly, you can't. I think unless you get rid of a guy like Eric Stahl and move somebody to the middle, I just don't see that. And secondly, you know, I know he didn't have the greatest year, especially in a contract year, until the very end, but you know, he's still going to command probably $6.5, $7 million, maybe somewhere in that price range. You know, I think
not going to get it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think when he was still playing with Minnesota, he could have maybe touched closer to 8, you know, potentially, if Minnesota wanted him bad enough. I mean, he was putting up almost a 70-point season, but you know, he's still he's gonna be maybe that Nick Bjugstad contract level, $5.5 million.
I'd even go lower than that with the flat cap. I would put him at 3.5 to 4.
Fair. I just think it's important to mention to people, because I think people want to see him in a Minnesota Wild sweater, but
I don't see it happening.
So many pieces have to move for that, especially you got to think about the Seattle expansion draft coming up. That just means you're exposing more of these young guys potentially. You know, and when the expansion draft comes up, is Mikael Granlund a guy that you would want to keep? But Nick, I really wanted to get your thoughts. Speaking of, you know, that contract that is potentially coming for him, where does Mikael Granlund end up in your mind?
That's a good question. I still think he stays in the Western Conference. I don't really know what team, you know, is out there really looking for a playmaker. You know, it's a hard one really to judge. You know, it wasn't like he was having a down year. He was at times a healthy scratch coming down in the playoffs for John Hines and the Nashville Predators. Typically, when you're in sort of the doghouse, you know, that's not typically a great sign for your contract negotiations. The good news for him is that, again, because of the NHL's economic situation and the fact that you could be, you know, sort of a low salary steal, and he maybe could reinvigorate his game, there might be plenty of teams that would be vying for his services. Again, he's an NHL veteran at this point who has playoff experience. We know we've seen what he can do and produce on the ice. To me, he's better off on the wing instead of being down the middle. He's certainly, defensively responsible. The problem is that there was so much offensive promise coming when he was first drafted, and really hasn't quite shown that potential. And you know, he's going to be more, you know, a third, fourth line type winger. And you know, for me, you know, there's still going to be plenty of opportunities, especially now with that flat cap for the NHL. It's hard to really pinpoint exactly where he might end up.
Yeah, definitely. The flat cap's going to affect things. I could see him being a good fit in a place like Arizona, maybe Edmonton, that sort of thing. But again, you might have cap issues there, especially if Taylor Hall decides to stay in a Coyotes uniform as well. So we'll keep you posted on that one. But that was the only NHL rumblings besides obviously the playoffs. And one other quick one, Nick. Mark Recchi, longtime NHLer and former assistant coach for the Penguins, just moved to the New Jersey Devils. Of course, he spent the last 3 years with Pittsburgh running the power play there. And Lindy Ruff, pretty much a journeyman at this point in the NHL as far as head coaching and assistant coaches are concerned. he's the new coach in New Jersey as well. So thought that was an interesting tidbit to jump into. But Nick, let's move right on into the playoffs here, because we only have 2 series to talk about currently in the conference finals, and that all started with our last series that we didn't get to talk about last week, the New York Islanders versus the Philadelphia Flyers. Really not much of a contest in this one. The New York Islanders, get out of here with your smug smile. I've had yeah, really not much of a contest. New York Islanders played a very stingy Game 7. I think that's what we see in Game 7s, where they're either run and gun, high octane, last shot kind of wins type thing, or you see one team that just finds a way to just really lock it down and find a way to get to their game early. Really, I think the goal by Green really invigorated that group to, once they have a lead and are able to expand on it, really hard to climb back against this Islanders team. No surprise there. And they jump into the series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay Lightning currently up 2-1 in that series, but holy smokes, has that been a heck of a series as well. All the series with the Lightning have been really exciting, but the Lightning, I don't know if this is their year, Nick, but this group has, I know Braden Point's out for Game 3, was out for Game 3, but this group just looks like the group that we finally expected to show up all these years later.
You would think that, Tampa, with the talent that they've had in this roster, should have won 3-4 Stanley Cups by now. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to do so. But yeah, this is a team that looks like they are keeping last year as much in the mirror as anybody else. They are out to prove themselves that last year was a fluke. It certainly, to me, would be a motivating factor if I was a player on last year's roster. Again, up 2-1 in that series. New York climbs back into it with a gutsy 5-3 win in Game 3 last night. It's been a really good series, especially for the top guns, Nikita Kucherov. Victor Hedman has been an absolute stud on the blue line. They're getting a lot of production from their defensemen as far as offense is concerned. That team is clicking in all cylinders. A bit of a rough go last night for the Islanders. A couple of late goals in the third after they came back down 2 in the third. So Tampa, again, able to climb back against a stingy Islanders team to tie it at 3, but then Brock Nelson gets the go-ahead eventual game winner. So good to see that series a little bit closer, but Tampa, again, these wins, these next 2 are going to be very tough against a very stingy Barry Trotz coach team. So it's been a very fun series to watch, and certainly the Islanders, to me, for this series, they played a very heavy physical game against. They were targeting Kucherov. They were targeting Cedric Paquette, Anthony Cirelli. So they're going after the big guns. They're really trying to target those guys. And if they can keep that game, kind of game plan going, I think that they might have a chance to climb back and tie the series up.
Yeah, kind of a war of attrition a little bit polar opposites. It makes me think if the New York Islanders can keep, that heavy style of play and really slow the hockey game down and really clog the middle of the ice, they're going to be the team, that moves on. But the Tampa Bay Lightning, high flying, high octane, really wants that fire wagon run and gun style of hockey, I think, to use their offensive spread to their advantage. Moving into the West, 2 teams that maybe kind of follow that similar pattern a little bit. I think Vegas facing off against Dallas. Vegas is maybe that team that has more of that high octane offense, and then Dallas is just trying to be a little more methodical in their game. But Dallas, I'm telling you, man, don't be sleeping on the Stars. I know they've had some injury woes, but they've found a way to get through injury-riddled Colorado, but they're really proving their mettle against this Vegas Golden Knights team, up 2-1 in that series. And I don't know, man. This Stars team, especially comparative to last year when Ben Bishop really carried them, it's more winning by committee. It reminds me of the Vegas Golden Knights the first year that they came into the league a little bit, where, I know Marc-Andre Fleury had a heck of a season, but William Karlsson was unbelievable. But, besides that, the rest of that group really just found a way to kind of gel together. And right now, this series has 7 games, to me, written all over it.
It really does, and the Dallas Stars have rallied around Anton Khudobin, a former Minnesota Wild pick way back in the day with the Houston Aeros. Been quite the journeyman when it comes to NHL goaltenders, and he is carrying that Dallas Stars squad right now. You talk about Dallas being an opportunistic team. The only reason they have a 2-1 lead is a goal 31 seconds in overtime. It was Alexander Radulov. A pretty sloppy play through the neutral zone, a bit too aggressive when you call it the run and gun style. They're again, Vegas likes to use guys like Nate Schmidt, Shea Theodore to jump in on that rush to try to carry the puck into the offensive zone. There was a turnover on the offensive blue line, a quick transition. Again, in overtime, it's the far change. So you had a player change for Dallas behind the play, and Radulov was blue line in all alone against Robin Lehner, and just a perfect shot there from the Russian Stars. So I expect Vegas again to again respond. They're always a team that likes to respond after a loss, and I think that the series has going to be tied up 2-2 after tonight's Game 4, which is at 7 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Anton Khudobin, and I saw another podcast, Vegas Nightly. If you haven't gotten a chance, not that we promote podcasts here, but they just do a fantastic job. They're funny guys. So they mentioned maybe number 35 between the pipes has given them a bit of trouble, because Thatcher Demko also wore 35 for the Vancouver Canucks. So who knows? You never know how the hockey world works. But yeah, the Dallas Stars, Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, kind of finding their game a little bit again, something that I think that group has wanted for a long time, and their window might be closing, as a prime time veteran group, so to speak, in their prime years. So good to see goal scorer's goal by Alexander Radulov to put Vegas behind in that series. So yeah, should be a fun one. And we'll keep you up to date as we move towards the Stanley Cup final, checking out college hockey. But speaking of college hockey, Nick, we did have a fantastic guest, former longtime associate St. Cloud State, and assistant coach, I should say, Mike Gibbons joined us for the show. Has a little bit of boxing history that we're going to jump into. Some really funny stories from his time at your high school, Eastview High School. And just an all-around great guy, and made fun of me within 5 seconds of me jumping onto the Zoom call. So I think that's typical Mike Gibbons, right? A lot of fun. But let's jump right into it, everyone. Mike Gibbons in our Healthy Scratch interview segment.
With a new guest joining every week, it's a lineup chock full of players, coaches, fans, and more. This week's special guest is the Healthy Scratch.
And joining us this week for our Healthy Scratch interview, it's now former St. Cloud State associate head coach and former Eastview High School head coach, former the Bemidji star, Mr. Mike Gibbons. Mike, thanks for joining us this morning from up in northern Minnesota. You're on the lake. I can see you got some flags flying behind you. How are we doing this very early Tuesday morning?
Good. I got I don't know if you can see that, but we got can you see that? The Bemidji State flag and the St. Cloud State flag all flying from my flagpole. So I'm loyal to both places.
You've definitely, had some great, times, and, obviously served some great memories in hockey, obviously between the two spots, most recently with St. Cloud. Mike, I think I want to jump in real fast. Just a kind of a quick, cool quirk about you is that, and Noah will touch a little bit more on this, is that, you've served many, many years for the hockey community, but you come from a family not quite associated with. Actually, you had quite the boxing background. Noah, do you want to, kind of lead us into, sort of your background there?
I was going to say, I was worried you were going to let me not rip off my stats. So, it's funny if you go forward, right, Mike, you were at Bemidji State, and when you graduated, you held the record for most career points, but also the most career penalty minutes by a defenseman. And I think that's very, very fitting, because if you go back, I believe your grandfather was middleweight boxer Mike Gibbons, which I'm very curious to hear how you were named, but known as the St. Paul Phantom, and was arguably probably the best boxer of his time, never to win a title, but still be the best at his craft. And then, of course, brother Tom and son Jack were both really good boxers as well. Can you kind of just fill us in on, I would have never, I don't think a lot of people would have guessed that you had a grandfather that was arguably top 15 or top 20 all over the world in boxing, all those years ago in the early 1920s.
Yeah, we're very proud of our boxing family. We come from boxing roots, and Mike and Tommy. Tommy was the one that almost did bankrupt the town of Shelby, Montana, in his fight with Jack Dempsey. So that was a very famous heavyweight championship fight in the early 20th century. But Mike was one of the best boxers of his time, and people don't people of today don't realize how big boxing was, especially in the early 20th century. And Mike was one of the most famous people in Minnesota at the time. So we're very proud of our family and boxing tradition. It's funny. I gave the induction speech for when Mike was inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame of Minnesota, and I told a story how proud I was that I was named after such a famous person. And shortly before my father passed away, I kind of thanked him. My father was on his deathbed, and I said, Dad, thanks a lot for naming me after Mike. And he kind of went quiet, and he just, I had a twin sister that was with me at the time. And when we were talking to my father, and he kind of got silent and serious, and he goes, Mike and Pat, he goes, I got to be serious. He goes, my grandfather had Irish Setter dogs that were Pat and Mike. You guys were named after the dogs. You were named after Grandpa Mike. And so it was I actually started out boxing, and my father told me after a while, he goes, I'm going to tell you the same thing. My father, Mike, Grandpa Mike, your Grandpa Mike told me. And he said, son, he goes, you're not tough enough to box. He goes, just play hockey. So I took his advice and stayed with hockey.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think, especially because time has passed, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't kind of list off some of those accolades. And a great place to figure this out, the Tom and Mike Gibbons Preservation Society, you can find that at tmgps.com. Really cool website. Definitely go and check it out. But you talk about Mike Gibbons, 65 3-4 record, 38 knockouts from 1907 to 1922, stopped because of vision problems, was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1992, the World Boxing Hall of Fame in 1997, and oddly enough, the Minnesota Boxing Hall of Fame didn't take him until, I believe, 2010, might be around the time there, kind of 2000s is when it was listed. His brother Tommy was 56-4-1 with 48 knockouts, and then son Jack Gibbons, who would be your uncle Mike, had 42 knockouts and a 72 win streak. He won 101 of 107 fights. So note to self, don't piss off our current guest, Mike Gibbons, because
Yep.
So
good point.
Yeah. So you went to, I believe, Hill Murray High School, if I'm not mistaken. Then you spent a year with the Austin Mavericks in the mid-JHL before going to Bemidji State. And of course, you had a pretty good team in those 4 years from 75 to 79 at Bemidji. Captain in 79, 3 conference championships, a national championship title. What was your time like at Bemidji State? I mean, I've been up to that campus. It's a beautiful campus. They've got a cool little rink up there, lots of history. I mean, how much pride do you take in getting to Bemidji State? And then also, holy smokes, this is a long question, how did the Austin Mavericks play into this question as well?
The Austin Mavericks were not quite as good a team, but Bemidji, we had a legendary coach in Bob Peters, and I think he was instrumental in for me to become a coach, because just such a powerful person, and anyone that played for Bob Peters, they understand the importance of the impact that he made on their lives, and he's just a legendary coach, legendary person. We had great teams, great teammates, and like at any college student, your college friends, especially my college friends from Bemidji State, they remain some of my closest friends. I talk to them, some of them, for sure, all the time. And it was a wonderful experience. I met my wife up there, and beautiful campus. I love my time at Bemidji State. It was a great experience.
Yeah, kind of interesting. The Austin Mavericks, too, I think you had 81 points in 58 games, which is like 1.4 points per game, which I don't care who you are. For a defenseman, that's really good. Of course, inducted into the BSU Hall of Fame in 2006, so congratulations on that. You had a small playing career after college, the Richmond Rifles and the Hampton Aces in the EHL before getting into coaching, and had some pretty good success at Bemidji State early in coaching. Kind of take us through your playing career, what it was like to play a little bit professionally, and then what really brought you into coaching. Did you always know that when you were done as a player you wanted to be a coach, or did you want to just go and work business?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, no, I actually had no intention of becoming a coach. Actually, I wanted to play. My plan was to play 10 to 15 years of pro hockey, and after my time with the Hampton Aces, I signed with the Fort Wayne Comets in the International League, which was kind of a step up, and I was excited about kind of stepping up a league. And at the time, summertime, we worked at the Bemidji Hockey Camp, which is one of the biggest hockey camps in the country at the time. I was doing my thing in the summertime, just hanging out with my buddies and coaching a little bit at the hockey camp. And Bob Peters offers me the assistant job at Bemidji State. I said, "Gosh, thanks, Coach, but no thanks. I just signed with Fort Wayne." And Murray Williamson, who was Bob Peters' partner, he was legendary coach, two-time Olympic coach for 72 and 76 U.S. Olympic teams. Came up to me, goes, "Gibby," he goes, "you're crazy. That's a great offer." And I said, "Yeah, it's a good offer, but I want to play." And Murray said, "Gibby, you're never going to play in the NHL. You got to grow up and just take the offer." And every hockey player, any coach, any player that I coach, almost every player at any Division I school could, they all think they're going to play in the NHL, and I was certainly one of them. It kind of hit me between the eyes, and it's like, gosh, the guy might be right. I might not make it to the NHL, even though I thought, had that goal. And I thought about it after a while, and I said, it's a great opportunity to get into coaching and learn from a legend. And I never looked back. It was you always miss hockey, especially that first year out of it. They talk about NHLers, they have physical withdrawals after they retire. They're 15-year players, and it just kind of becomes them. So I remember having some withdrawals and being really missing the game, but I certainly never looked back.
Now, Mike, we talk about that transition from player to coach. There's always that feel, that competitive feel. Did coaching, kind of help, to kind of consume that, that competitive edge that you still had, maybe as a player, or did it take you a little bit of time to adjust from, playing to coaching?
Well, it took some time to adjust. I remember, going to the bars and I remember people saying, "Gosh, you're kind of old to be in a bar. You're not a college student anymore." And so there's an adjustment period, but you're right about the competitive part of it. I think that's the attraction for coaches. It's almost, it is. It's an adrenaline rush when you're playing the game and you're playing in those big games, and it's pretty much the exact same feeling. And it's more, anyone that's coached and played will tell you that coaching is more draining, which how can that be? You're sitting behind a bench in a sport coat and a tie, and after a game, you're more drained than the players, which is, how can that be? But you're not physically drained, but you're so mentally drained that it feels like you just went, 20 rounds with, Jack Johnson in the boxing ring, or Grandpa Mike for that matter. And it's an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, interesting. You jump in your coaching career. I mean, your first 30-win season in BSU history, national championship appearance against RIT. Then you spent a cup of coffees kind of everywhere: Northern Michigan, Colorado College, University of Denver, a couple head coaching gigs. Actually, it's funny because your gig both at Eastview and at St. Cloud State is kind of an anomaly because of how long they lasted. Going through that period in the mid to late 80s, early 90s, was there a reason that you kind of jumped around to all these college hockey teams, and what did you learn from that experience? Because I guess it's just interesting to me to see. I think Bob Motzko told us a couple episodes ago, it's good for coaches to move. And did you follow that philosophy?
Yeah, I was just kind of looking again, just like kind of getting to the NHL as a player. You kind of always want to move up, and I was kind of the second assistant at Northern Michigan, and Brad Buto offered me to kind of the top spot, and I remember I turned him down, and I was at the coaches convention in Naples, Florida, and I told my wife, hey, it was funny, Brad Buto offered me the job at Colorado College, and we lived in Marquette at the time, right? And there was like 400 inches of snow that winter, and my wife, there's silence on the other end, and she goes, what'd you tell Brad? And I told him I wasn't interested. I had a great job here, we had a great team, and she kind of yelled at me, "Are you crazy? Have you ever been to Colorado Springs in Colorado? It's a beautiful place, and you can be the top guy." It's like, "You're right, honey." So I called Brad back and accepted the job. So, it's very common to move around for coaches. I remember, again, I hung out with my good friend Tom McFarland, was a Hill Murray buddy, and he was the coach at Cloquet, and my 8-year-old son was playing with his 8-year-old daughter in the basement, and I was overhearing what they were saying, and my son goes to Tom McFarland's daughter, he goes, "You've lived in the same house for 8 years. I've lived in like 11 different houses." But that was just the nature of our sport, our game. You kind of moved around a little bit, but that was the neat thing about St. Cloud State and also about Eastview. We established some roots, and at the time, it was a great time to raise them. We had 3 kids, and they were young. It was great to be a high school coach. I don't think there's a better environment to raise a family than to be a teacher or a coach at the high school level. You got summers off, you got Christmas and Easter off, and you can spend some real quality time. So it was a great move for me, especially for my family, for me to be able to raise a family and still be in the game.
Yeah, let's, Nick, sorry to cut you off there. I think let's just go through his coaching history real quick before we get to the fun stuff. We got to give people the facts, I think. You coached the Langley Thunder in the BCJHL, 2 years in the AHL with the Baltimore Bandits, and I believe you were the camp coach for the Mighty Ducks in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. USA hockey teams, assistant coach for the World Juniors in 2006. Coached some pretty good players when that program started at Eastview, probably some bad players too. Nick, I'm not looking at you. And then, of course, St. Cloud from 2007 to 2020. In all that vast coaching history, that World Junior Championship, the Frozen Four in 2013 with St. Cloud. From that time, is there anything that really sticks out to you as being kind of the penultimate experience for you that was just a level above the rest during those years of coaching? Or is it just kind of all, holy smokes, I can't believe I got to do this?
Yeah, it was great at every level, obviously. But I think the two things that stick out a lot, being the first St. Cloud State hockey team that went to a Frozen Four, that was a magical run. And that was an awful lot of fun. Winning, the outright WCHA championship, that was great players, great team. That was magical. And I think for me and a lot of coaches, I think equally as magical, we took that Eastview High School team which was basically an expansion franchise. Our first year I think we had 3 wins, and one was against the mighty Fairmont Falcons and the Ely Bears, and we upset Apple Valley. But I believe we only had 3 or 4 wins that first year. It was good. It was good to be in the same place at the same time, and that's where, like St. Cloud, my 13 years at St. Cloud was just magical too.
Speaking of VCU High School, Coach, I never played for you, but we definitely spent some time in the same building. I was an ECU graduate in 2005. There were some pretty good hockey players coming out of my graduating year. Sam Bowler, Ryan McDonough were a couple that I remember from that 05 senior season. But a lot of folks don't know you also taught physical ed. You also were a driver's ed teacher. And for those who don't know, you actually have a pretty creative side. There was one game during a class you taught, which was called Winter Outdoor Rec. And if it was either too cold or if there was some weather happening outside and we couldn't do the scheduled activity, you came up with something called tennis racquetball hockey. And I remember it being the most fun gym activity I've ever, been a part of. And I kind of want you to explain to the audience, what it is and how you came up with it. And I hear there's also another little funny story that may have maybe caught somebody off guard with it too.
Yeah. Well, you're always looking for fun things to do in your VI class. Certainly, I was always looking for something fun to do. So, coming from a hockey background, I wanted to play floor hockey, but that was kind of boring. And we didn't have enough floor hockey sticks for the whole class. So I kind of wanted to get everyone involved. So in the fire department, we had tennis rackets, and I gave everyone a tennis racket, put them up on one side, a small gym with 4 walls on each side, and put the 2 nets up, and we started out with tennis balls. It was kind of fun, but somehow we ran out of tennis balls, and we just used a racket ball. And my God, a puck travels for NHL player about 100 miles an hour. A tennis ball, the pros hit those things about 140 miles an hour. I don't know how quick a racquetball can go. It's probably a lot faster than 140 miles an hour, and it's all relative to the talent there. But that racquetball was zipping around all the time, and I remember playing goalie, and some tennis star wound up with a shot and whizzed a ball right by me. I didn't even see it coming. I mean, you can always see a puck coming, generally speaking. You can see the blur, but a racquetball went so fast that it was you couldn't even see it, and that made it really fun. There's a funny story. We had a girl hockey player that was a very good athlete, and she wasn't involved very much. And I said, get in, play goalie, and she says, okay, and she stood in front of the net, and one of the best athletes, Mike Freeman, played a little tennis, and he had a wicked slap shot, and the ball came to it, it bounced just right, and he whizzed a shot and hit Lauren right in mid-thigh, and she went down like like she was in a war and got shot by a sniper's bullet. And she came over to me and she goes, "Mr. Gibbons is all right." And all I saw was a huge welt right in the middle of her thigh, and it was growing, larger every second. And I said, "Hey, it looks fine. You're just fine there. No problem." And anyway, she showed up the next day, and her whole leg was black and blue, and she kind of sarcastically said, "How's it look now? How's it look now? Is it getting any better, Mr. Gibbons?" It's like, yes, you look pretty good, So it was a fun sport. We had a lot of different fun sports. One we played all the time was poof hockey in the wrestling room, and that was where they had a foam ball, but they also had foam sticks, but they were taped up pretty good with like not duct tape but plastic tape, and I always told them that slashing was not only allowed, it was encouraged. So these high school kids non-athletes would be going down the middle of the wrestling room, and they get whacked about. Everyone had a stick. They get hit about by 10 different players the whole time. It was, but you never really got hurt very bad, except for, of course, Lauren with a racquetball in the thigh. But we had a lot of fun in our classes. That was the most important thing for me in physical education as a teacher.
So that's what that degree and master's in physical education will get you. When you talk about Eastview, we've also heard pretty much you're essentially a master recruiter for St. Cloud State is really the story that we get. Eastview's own actually Dre Bradley retired within a day of you. So you two have been the only two at Eastview to coach there currently. Working with high school kids for 10 seasons and then moving back into the college hockey world, do you have any good recruiting stories? But then also, what makes a good recruiter? Do you feel like that time in high school really helped you develop that craft, or do you just kind of have that? I feel like you have that personality knack that maybe just, you can't really teach. You just make people laugh, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think, did high school help as a recruiter? I think absolutely. It refreshed me a little bit, and. But what makes a good recruiter? I think you got to be yourself, but I think you also have to really connect with kids and connect with families. And I think if you're a teacher, if you're a coach, and you have that personality, you have to be yourself, and somehow you have to connect with them. And once you do that, then you're in the game at least. And so I think that's the important part. But I think the one thing about high school for me was I remember I was with the Baltimore Bandits of the American Hockey League, and they moved to Cincinnati. My wife at the time had a better job than I had, making more money selling cheerleading outfits, and she kind of broke down in tears about Cincinnati. She was going to lose her job, and we had just had our third kid, and there was a new high school opening up in Apple Valley, and the assistant principal and his wife were personal friends of ours that went to Bemidji, Randy Peterson and his wife Lisa. And he offered me the job, and it kind of in jest, to go from the American League to high school. But the timing was exactly perfect because I was chasing the dream, I guess, to become an NHL coach, and at the same time, it's I think we got sick of moving around, and the timing was perfect for me to get back to Minnesota. We were both from Minnesota, and I quickly learned that coaching is coaching. And then my good friend again, Tom McFarland from Cloquet, I was asking him about the move, and he goes, Gibby, you wouldn't believe the difference as a high school coach you can make on these kids. And you compare that, you can make it. You want to make a difference no matter where you are. But pro players is like they're on the fast track too, and high school kids you can really connect with those guys. You can really make a lasting time impact on those kids, and that was very rewarding. I think as a coach, the great coaches, they're not doing it really to get to the NHL. They're doing it because they love the sport. They love working with kids, and they like making a difference in people's lives. And I think the great ones are the ones that are in it to make a difference in kids' lives, more so than them just moving ahead in the coaching profession.
Sorry, Coach, I thought you had finished your sentence there. It was getting a little jumpy. But speaking of jumping, you talk about you spent all that time at Eastview. 2007, you make the move up to St. Cloud. Was there a phone call that came to you, or how did that opportunity to actually get to St. Cloud State arise?
Absolutely. Coach Motzko out of the blue just called me, and he said they're interested in getting back in the rat race. And, I think the timing was perfect. I'd been 10 years at Eastview, and I think, one thing about coaching for me is it's not a part-time job. And as a high school coach, I put my heart and soul into everything I did as a high school coach and as a teacher. And after 10 years doing the same thing, it was a welcome change from something fresh, something exciting. And Coach Motzko rebooted the program. There's an excitement at St. Cloud State, and I could feel that. I could see that. And it was just a great opportunity to get back into the college hockey, wars.
Yeah, I believe it's, I think you had in your time there, 64 all-conference players, 7 top 10 Hobey Baker finalists, including Drew LeBlanc in 2013. Are there a couple of handful of players that really stick out to you in your time at St. Cloud State, or does it kind of just ebb and flow where it seems like each generation gets better than the next? Any funny recruiting stories, a couple of guys where it really took a lot of push and pull to get into the university? Just a couple of guys that really stood out to you in your time at St. Cloud.
I think it'd be unfair to just talk about a couple different players because it was the whole, all the great players, and I'm very proud of all the quality of the people that we recruited to St. Cloud State, and I think that's the most important thing too. Is it takes not to sound like a Democrat, but it takes a village to recruit, but it does. There's not just one single recruiter. The head coach is very important. The trainers, the equipment guy, the other assistant, faculty, ADs, everyone's involved in the recruiting. So, how many funny recruiting stories? How much time do you have? I think every recruiter has so many hilarious stories about recruiting. And I go back to one of the funnier ones is actually, I remember being with the Austin Mavericks, and there was a Yale recruiter that tried to recruit me, and after a game, he was all excited, and he kind of stopped me before I got to the locker room. He goes, he goes, Mike, he goes, you're just the kind of player we needed, Yale. He goes, let's meet for lunch the next morning. And I said, gosh, that's exciting. So we met, and at this restaurant, and he didn't seem quite as excited, and he's like, Mike, he goes, at Yale, he goes, you need pretty good grades. And I just met with your principal, and quite frankly, or Mike, he goes, we couldn't get you into Yale with our crowbar, So I give that guy credit because, he still met with me, even though I couldn't get into Yale, but I did get into Bemidji State, which is a great move. But on the recruiting trail for St. Cloud State, one of the kind of the more interesting things for me was going overseas, and I started, kind of going to Sweden first before I really got into the Finns in Finland. Because at the time, Sweden had a better hockey program. It was, about that time, Finland just started to take off, and I'd kind of go back and forth between Finland and Sweden. And I remember making that drive from Sweden over to Finland, and I think you get about 30 miles from the Arctic Circle as you travel over the Finnish Sea, or whatever the ocean is between Sweden and Finland. And I remember the first time I saw a caribou on the road, and I had to stop the car and look at it. It's like, and just looking at me, it's kind of funny. And I drive along a little bit, and all of a sudden I see 2 or 3 caribou, and that was amazing for me. Those big antlers, and I'd even get out of the car and look at them and drive around a little bit. All of a sudden there was like hundreds and thousands in the road. I'm honking my horn and said, get off the road, you crazy animal. So that was kind of funny. But I remember traveling. I was in northern Sweden, and I had to get to Stockholm, and I had to literally drive through the night to get there to watch Oliver Lordsson play in downtown Sweden, or Stockholm. And I remember they had the moose warning signs, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. You always see, in Minnesota, you see a deer crossing sign. You're like, yeah, right. And I said, the world's smallest rental car looked like a tin can. And I had to get to Stockholm, so I had to just get there. And I started out going about 50 miles an hour, looking all over for moose, and if this tin can hit a moose, we'd be in trouble. And I said, finally, there's no moose, and they'd see the signs. And I said, screw it. I'm just going to get there. So I accelerated about 80, 85 miles an hour. And just as I started going, I literally, there is the head of a moose with antlers that missed me by about literally inches on my left. And it was the most afraid I've ever, my heart just started beating. I'm going, this is, if I would have hit that guy, I guess they die all the time on that interstate between northern Sweden and Stockholm. And I said, wow, this is crazy. So I slowed back down. I'd learned my lesson. And, but again, I kind of had to get there, and I got impatient. I picked her back up again. I said, I got the high beams on, and I guess moose don't have that stuff in their eyes where you can see them, is what I was told later. So I had to get there, and I started to pick it up again. But I'm looking to my left, looking for that moose, and sure enough, all of a sudden on my right side was a moose's rear end. And I was looking to the left for the moose. This guy was on the other side. So that was probably the second most afraid I've ever been in my life, because I missed him by just a couple inches. But I ended up getting to watch Oliver Lordsson, and I think he was our first European that we ever got. So it was he was an interesting player and a great kid. And he he was such an impressive person that he added so much to the locker room that it's like we could always use another one like him in our locker rooms. He kind of motivated us to open up the European, expansion for St. Cloud State.
Kind of funny. I remember the first time I met you, I think it was actually after a practice. You guys were getting ready to eat some food and I was getting ready for some media thing. And you were like, yeah, it's nice to have good food again. I'm sick of eating gas station burgers, on the road recruiting. And I'm like, gosh, I would love to eat gas station burgers on the road recruiting one hockey team. But kind of cool, interesting story. Yeah. You retire on March 19th. What kind of came into that decision? How has retired life been? What have you been up to? And then how well do you know Dave Shyak, and kind of what's your opinion of him as he takes the mantle from you in a position that you've really built at that program with Bob Motzko and Brett Larson?
Yeah, I think like everybody, everyone was kind of shocked and surprised that the hockey season could actually end prematurely. At the time, I was just totally focused on trying to win that round and continue our season. But it was after that game that, it wasn't made up before that I was going to retire. Absolutely not. But, I kind of, it's certainly a complex question for me to answer, but I can tell you that I think, my job being a recruiter is not an easy job at all. I wanted to, we had such success here at St. Cloud State. I kind of wanted to go out on top, so to speak. I didn't want to be one of those guys that hung around too long. I wanted to be good at what I did. And for the first time really ever in my career, I started to think about the whole recruiting process. And it's a long process. You might recruit a kid for 2-3 years before you even get them to commit. And then it's another 3 years before they even show up on your campus, sometimes longer. And I'm thinking, for me to pour my heart and soul, like you have to recruit kids to St. Cloud State, part of the motivation is to get to know these guys, get to know their family. And I'm like, these guys, I'm not ever going to even coach them. In fact, they might, in the next year or two, I might be gone. So I kind of use that as a barometer, I guess, to I had to have that motivation to do what I did. And if I didn't have that motivation, could I still be good? And I think also, my dad retired at 62 and had a great retirement life after. And I had to accept the fact that I was in fact getting older, even though I hated to admit that. And, I love my wife and I wanted to have a life after hockey. After, how's it going? People ask. It's going wonderful. We live on a beautiful lake here and 10 miles out of St. Cloud, and we love it here. And we have a lot of friends up and I'm working all the time to make this place a better spot. We're going to go to Florida for a month. So I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy retirement. I'm certainly going to miss certainly all the players, all the staff at St. Cloud State. I'm going to be their biggest fan. Certainly I considered a lot of the guys still out there, some of my boys, and even some of the recruits coming in are some of our guys anyway. And I'm just such a huge fan of St. Cloud State, and I love everything about it. I'm really excited about the current staff. Brett Larson's a stud. Nick Oliver, I think, is one of the best young assistants, not one of the best assistants in college hockey. And Dave Shyak, I certainly I recruited him to Northern Michigan back in 1902 or whatever the heck that was, and he's a terrific hockey guy, and I think he's fitting in great with the staff, and he's a good friend. So it's gonna. I'm not going to hang around the locker room, but I'm certainly going to show up to just make sure those guys are still doing things correctly, I guess, right? So it's, it'll be fun for me. It'll be fun for me to literally just be a fan watching, great hockey. I'm so excited about this year's team and all the great players, great kids, that I sure hope that, they can have if not an entire season, certainly almost a full season anyway would be great. Husky fans are going to be maybe pleasantly surprised at how good this team is going to be, in my opinion.
Mike, you actually made the decision to retire about a year ago, so before the season began. And we talked before the show about that moment when the series at Western Michigan was canceled. And I want to just kind of break down a little bit about the emotions of that day. When was there an expectation there that something might happen as far as maybe the game or the weekend being canceled? And then when it was, how long did it really sink in that at this point retirement was there and your coaching days were over?
Yeah, I think just the sadness, I guess, of the season ending is always traumatic for a coach and a player. But no one has experienced, a COVID pandemic that to end your season. So I think everyone was trying to digest it in their own way, and it was like almost like, is this really happening? Usually it's some really tough loss in overtime, or a hard fought win or a loss, or to either continue your season or end it. And it's always such an emotional thing. I think every hockey player, that last game is always so emotional. And I think ending a 4-year college career is really a powerful thing for anybody, or maybe somebody like, one of the guys that might sign early after 3 years, that's such a special time in their life. And for me, I think it was sad, but for me, I kind of live in the present, and you can say I didn't really look at it as a sad time. I looked at it as kind of an exciting time for me, a new challenge, a new exciting move. And so I never, I guess I never kind of look back. I think I'm an optimistic guy, and I try not to do a sadness. It's certainly, I'm not going to dwell in any sadness. I'm going to move on and make the best of whatever that situation is. So right now I'm in a great spot. Again, I love where I'm at. I love what I'm doing. And I'm going to do something around hockey. I'm not going to be a coach. I'm currently coaching the Blades 16 team it's a 2-month gig, I was told. So that's been kind of fun. Some of the best players in the state are on my team, and so I'm going to be. Don't tell him I'm going to be quietly recruiting some of these guys at St. Cloud State. I can tell you that. I think it's legal for me to do that. So,
we won't tell.
I'm going to continue to recruit for St. Cloud State. Don't tell the NCAA. I'm going to encourage as many good players as I know or see that St. Cloud State is a great fit for any or all of them.
Yeah.
We have arguably a couple of the best players in the state on our team, and I'm already whispering in their ear, St. Cloud State, St. Cloud State. It's not even a whisper sometimes. It's a bullhorn. Go to St. Cloud State. It's a great spot. All you great players. So I'm going to keep recruiting here.
Well, there's a reason that Mike Gibbons was called the St. Cloud Phantom, right? You're just that phantom voice in the corner telling everybody to go to St. Cloud.
Yeah. St. Cloud State, St. Cloud State, that's your best place. They're like, I want to go to St. Cloud State. Yeah, absolutely.
Sign me up, Dad. I've only got a couple more questions, and Nick, I'm sure you have one or two as well. I got to ask now that you're a fan, you have such big ties to Bemidji, such big ties to St. Cloud State. As a fan, Nick and I are kind of fans, and I think it's really cool for the listeners to know that Nick and I were actually your last live interview for media during a hockey game. We were the last ones ever to interview you in your coaching career at St. Cloud during a live game. Not a big deal. But
yeah, for me, it is.
So if St. Cloud's playing Bemidji in the national championship game, which if that happens will be absolutely awesome for both of these programs, they definitely deserve it. Do you just sit back and enjoy it all, or is there a team that you kind of have a little more loyalty to if it comes down to it?
That's a great question. And obviously that would be unbelievable if that ever happened. But at the point right now, a lot of my boys and my heart is with St. Cloud State. I think it will always be. But Bemidji also has a big chunk of my heart too. And I love St. Cloud, Bemidji State. Especially in the summertime, it's a great spot. But I'm very proud of that program, and they had a great team last year. So I think the short answer is, right now it's still St. Cloud State. All the players, all the connections that I have, I just love it here. But Bemidji State is certainly right there. They're right there. I got 2 flags flying out there. They're both an important part of my life.
This is my last question, Mike, and then I'll hand it up to Noah for the final question. We've asked Don Lucia, we've asked Bob Motzko, we've asked Brett Larson about their opinion on where college hockey is at. And we've heard the same response, at least from the 3 of them, of what it would take to kind of keep growing college hockey. And obviously there's some challenges with Alabama Huntsville, with Alaska Anchorage, but all 3 have echoed the same response, which is we need to kind of rekindle those old rivalries that the old WCHA had. So more time against the Gophers, throw Wisconsin in there. For you, where is college hockey at right now? And do you agree that we need to continue to develop and rekindle these closer rivalries, or as they would call it, regionality schedules when it comes between these teams in Minnesota and maybe Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think if you look just at the great teams in the state of Minnesota last year, Bemidji was very good. Mankato was great. Duluth was great. Actually, Minnesota and St. Cloud State were really good at times. I mean, if all those teams were all in the same league, imagine those games. And, the powers that be made a different move, and everyone's going to agree that it wasn't a positive move. But I agree. I mean, St. Cloud State, the Gopher rivalry is what made St. Cloud State great. To have little old St. Cloud State that you can't compete in any sport, regularly, not only compete, but, oftentimes, wax the Gophers. And that's a great thing for a small little school here, I guess. So I agree. Hockey is so important in this area. I think it's very important that St. Cloud State plays plays Minnesota and Mankato and Bemidji, and of course the other programs, Wisconsin. So absolutely rekindle those rivalries. And if you can't do it in a league, at least have the Minnesota Cup going on. They needed to keep that going. Because the rivalries are real between St. Cloud and Bemidji, St. Cloud and Mankato, St. Cloud and Minnesota, St. Cloud and Duluth. Keep those rivalries really strong.
My last question, this one's only a 2-parter. I think it might be my shortest question of the day. But VT Miettinen is getting ready for his transition over in a Huskies uniform, as is more guys in that freshman class. Did you happen to recruit him? And then on that note,
how good is he? No, what's the second part?
For young hockey, especially guys, who do have a talent for the game and are looking to really develop into Division I hockey players, is there a couple of things as a recruiter that you're looking for or you would like to point out for them to develop their game? Like, what are some things that you would recommend to these players, at that age where they're trying to mature at 15, 16, 17 years old to really take their game to that level and get themselves in an NCAA uniform?
Yeah. Well, the first part about Vetti Miettinen, he's an absolute stud and a great kid. And he's getting, there's a lot of good freshman players coming in, and a lot of good recruits that are going to be coming in. But Vetti I think he's a superstar, not to put too much pressure on him, but he's just a stud. He shoots the puck like nobody I've ever seen. And certainly we all had a part in recruiting that kid. And that's the biggest part of this season. They have to have a stitch season. Fans have to be able to see some of these good young freshmen coming in next year. That's really important. Is there some young players have to really strive for to become Division I players. Be yourself, but also I think an important part is I look almost the first thing I'm going to look at is what is your hockey sense? How aware of you of the game? How smart are you on the ice? Can you use your other teammates? Can you even see that pass to make? And I think besides the character of our players, I think the biggest thing St. Cloud State has always had for them, they've had, quote, hockey players, and that was a big Moscow thing. It's just, we need hockey players here. I don't care their size. We need guys that can pass the puck and make plays, not just big and strong future NHLers. We need hockey players, and I think everyone, all the players, especially the past 5, 6, 7 years have been terrifically smart, crafty hockey players, and I think that as a young player, how do you acquire those kinds of skills? I think you got to be a student of the game. You got to be a rink rat. You got to spend time on the outdoor rink just playing games. More importantly than working on leg strength and the perfect stride, you really have to become a rink rat to develop that. And some guys have natural gift, but I really think a player can develop that rink rat mentality just by hanging out at the rink and playing as many games as you can on the back pond. Good question, Joe.
Sorry about that. Former St. Cloud State assistant head coach Mike Gibbons and recruiting aficionado. Mike, I know that you now are basically the ultimate fisherman, and we again thank you for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully we see you again soon over at Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, and hope to have you on another time.
Thanks, Nick, and Noah. Great to catch up with you guys.
Great to catch up with you too, and catch some walleye for us if you can.
What's that?
Catch some walleye for us if you can.
I'm kind of a crappie guy. Crappie's better tasting. Every northern Minnesota guy's going to tell you that. Great tasting fish, and I fish just to eat those suckers. So
that's because Nick doesn't know how that kind of stuff works.
This is true. So, and again, thanks for joining us, Mike.
All right, guys. Have a good day.
Take the Huskies Warming House podcast wherever you go. Find the newest episodes or listen to your favorite on iTunes and Podbean. Get all the latest news and updates at huskieswarminghousepodcast.com and look for our Facebook page, the Huskies Warming House Podcast, as well as our Twitter feed at Warming House Den. Our Twitter feed will host trivia, updates, and questions for fans, as well as a mailbag where you can tweet us anytime with your questions, concerns, or listener suggestion. And for business inquiries, email us at huskieswarminghousepodcast@outlook.com.
And again, thank you as always again to former assistant coach Mike Gibbons. What a fun interview that was. Noah, just an overall great guy. And as you can see, still trying to pull some strings to get some of the better young talents to choose St. Cloud State over maybe some of our in-state rivals.
Yeah, he was an absolute blast. I didn't know if we were supposed to put that one in there or not. I have no idea, but I don't know. To be honest, like, I know we've had, it's crazy to think this is our 28th episode, and we love all of our guests. Like, don't get me wrong, we love having them, but some people, like Mike Gibbons, when they jump on, they're joking, they're relaxed, they're cordial, like, we're not intimidating guys, I don't think, but like, I think everyone thinks that, when they come on the show, like, we're going to be these big professional guys and that sort of thing. Like, we're nervous too. And to have guests that are able to just relate to us on a personal level right away makes us feel at home too, and makes us relax as well. So I think Mike Gibbons does a really fantastic job of that. And from the start to finish, he was just 50 minutes of interview time did not feel like 50 minutes. Let's just put it that way.
Not at all. And speaking of college hockey, let's transition to our discussion topic here, Noah. It is Nick Bjugstad in the pretty darn good trade, or at least to me, it's a good trade. We're seeing definitely some mixed reviews out there on social media, but it comes to Minnesota via Pittsburgh. Again, original pick of the Florida Panthers. He was Mr. Hockey for Minnesota State High School in 2010 for the Blaine Bengals High School, and comes over here as a 6'7" center / winger. basically it's for a conditional 7th round pick. And I guess the conditions are how many games he plays and possibly some points are being scored. And here's the other thing. Pittsburgh is retaining half of his $4.1 million salary, which means Minnesota's cap hit and salary he's owed is $2.05 million. So to me, this is a very low risk and potentially high reward trade. To me, just because of the situation with the team, with the flat cap, you're gaining potential center. Now, there's certainly some question marks. I don't think anybody's going to deny around his health, but for a low-risk acquisition that's cost you almost nothing, why wouldn't you do it? This is a great trade by Bill Guerin.
Yeah, I really don't understand the frustration with Minnesota Wild fans. You know, and like, here's what I really have a gripe with when it comes to Minnesota fans. Like, I've been a Wild fan all my life. I'm sure you have, Nick. You know, you've actually probably were a North Stars fan at some point as a kid growing up. So I
was.
So the thing that I don't get, you know, everyone says, oh, we need to, you know, trade a defenseman. We need a center. You know, we need that second line center. You know, we need a first line center. Like, those don't just grow on trees. They don't just fall out of the sky in a trade. Like,
no.
If you think about, I don't know, Nick, can you give me a name of a good, let's be really ridiculous here. Let's say the Minnesota Wild want to pick up Mark Scheifele, right, from the Winnipeg Jets. Nick, I can't even begin to honestly think about what is that trade package. That's probably Matt Dumba. That's probably Matthew Boyd, another first-round pick, and like a third-round pick?
Maybe even a second. And I don't even know if it's Matt Dumba. It might be Jonas Brodin or Jared Spurgeon.
It might be Matt Dumba and Jonas Brodin if Kalen Addison, you know, starts to come into form too. I mean, like, you don't just go and pick up premium centermen. I mean, free agency is really your time to do that, and that's where you're you're shedding cap, similar to what Pittsburgh is kind of doing right now, in order to make room for another big fish. You talk about salary. The Minnesota Wild and both the Pittsburgh Penguins both will owe $2.05 million on this deal. So, I mean, if you're talking about a guy who, I know he's been injury ridden. Of course, he was traded a couple of years ago and, you know, I don't know if he was playing hurt or, you know, really just struggled with the trade. But you go back 2017-18, the guy had 49 points. You know what I mean? On a Florida Panthers group that was, they were okay. You know, did they make the playoffs that year? I think maybe that was the year that they maybe made the playoffs. But I mean, like, that's a guy where it's like, you pick up a guy who has nothing but potential upside, you know, he's only 28 years old. You know, he's in the prime of his career. Bill Guerin says he's hungry, ready to come back from that core injury / back injury that he was dealing with. You know, a guy who's really going to have to earn everything through training camp, you know, and has the price tag to hopefully prove it. I mean, when you compare him to a guy like Victor Rask, I mean, what are you complaining about as a Minnesota Wild fan where all you gave up is a 7th, potentially 6th round pick? Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm so pissed off by it, Nick. I don't get the animosity towards this kind of a trade. Like I really have to ask, and like, tweet at us if you want to let us know what trade as a Minnesota Wild fan makes you feel like all giddy inside. You know, like,
there's not many, honestly. Here's the problem with the conversations that's out there. And I want to talk about actually what the impact of the acquisition of Bjugstad actually does to some other players, like, say, Alex Galchenyuk. I think that signals he's not coming back. Yeah. I also think that possibly what this does is it almost cements the buyout of Victor Rask. So, you know, the impact of the Bjugstad acquisition actually has some meaning for some other players that are looking, you know, at their current spot and going, gee, I thought I was coming back and maybe I'm not. So it's interesting, but the problem is there's always the fun thought of, let's trade for Scheifele, let's trade for McDavid, let's do this. And then you break it down to brass tacks, meaning you talk about what the package would be to go back. And are you really gaining anything by losing 3, if not 4 players plus possible future considerations for one player? That's, to me, an acquisition where that's a final piece of the puzzle. Honestly, you don't make that kind of a package unless you are going to be a cup contender and you're really pushing for a Stanley Cup. Minnesota is in a kind of a midst of a half rebuild. to me, they're not a cup contender right now if you're looking at the roster. Let's be real. And I know that the Minnesota Wild fans, they want to see this team to become a contender. The problem is, especially with the things that have been affected with COVID-19, the league in itself, the salary caps and everything, it's going to be very difficult, not only for Bill Guerin, but for any GM right now to make a big splash with salary unless you're taking back, or giving up salary. It's going to have to be an even for even dollar trade. And again, with, especially the money considerations, the draft picks, to me, especially those high-end draft picks, people are going to want to hang on to those because that's cheap labor. Part of this is cheap labor. You can get a player for up 2 or 3 years, depending on when you sign them, at an entry-level deal. So that can help you kind of ride the wave of this coronavirus impact on the NHL economy, if you want to call it. So to me, this, it's not going to be easy. And is there more moves to be made from Bill Guerin? Yes, I do. But again, you're not going to be able to make that big splash trade. To me, it's going to have to come from, as you mentioned, free agency. And again, you also have to think about the players that are out there that are that good. A lot of them have no movement clauses, and they're going to have to submit, the teams they want to be traded to. If I'm Mark Scheifele, if I'm, John Gabriel Prazio, big, good centers in the NHL, am I really wanting to come to Minnesota? Do I feel like I'm a cup contender right now? To me, the answer is no. There's not enough there just yet. You have to build a case around it first to be able to do that. That's the whole reason why Zach Parise and Ryan Suter were brought in the first place. We can talk about their albatross of contracts all you want, but they were there to promote Minnesota to be a free agent spot for players that were out there on the market. Unfortunately, I think that window's closing for as far as their luster is concerned. But no, being an initial GM is not simply just picking up the phone and saying, "Yep, I want that guy," and I'll give away all my beans. No, you can't sacrifice 2, 3, 4 years of your future to get one guy. Ask the Minnesota Vikings in the Herschel Walker trade how well that works out. It rarely ever does.
Yeah, that's the other thing is you don't know as a contender, you might bring in a guy, like Marian Gaborik or Paul Stastny that does make a sizable impact, or you might bring a guy in like Martin Havlat that absolutely implodes. I shouldn't say implodes. I think that team really ran into a really hot goaltender in Jake Allen, who's now with the Montreal Canadiens, formerly the St. Louis Blues in those playoffs back in the 2015s, 2016s. But, you got to think about a couple of other things too. You talk about cementing the buyout of Victor Rask. This might also mean a guy like Mikko Koivu is on his way out. It sucks to say, and I don't know what Mikko Koivu's plans are, but, he might not get a contract offer from the Minnesota Wild at this point, or he might be a 13th forward. Another guy you got to think about, a guy like Nico Sturm. Where does he fit in the lineup? I thought he had a fantastic playoffs, but, he's still that bubble player. Jordan Greenway, does he get pushed in camp a little bit? Is this kind of a wake-up call for him? You mentioned a guy like Alex Galchenyuk. Maybe they keep all these guys around and kind of Hunger Games them a little bit and put those 4 guys, in that group, put them on the 4th line and say, who wants it bad enough? It makes me think of a couple years ago, Eric Fehr kind of earned that spot coming back. I believe, was he on a PTO, if I'm not mistaken? Mm-hmm. Eric Fehr, really earned his time in a Minnesota Wild sweater and played very well because of it. So a lot of indications, if anything, Bill Guerin is just trying to create a little more spark, I think, just trying to see, I've got 3 or 4 options now that I can go to, in the center position or the wing position, down in that bottom 6 group. Show it to me. Prove it to me. Who's going to be that guy that's going to be stepping up that wants to wear the green and wheat sweater and be that guy for the Minnesota Wild. But like you mentioned, fans, if you really want to know, where does your number 1 center or your top 6 center come from? Or, this guy that's going to develop into your big goal scorer, number 9 draft pick, 2020 NHL draft. That's where it starts. Unless you go to free agency and happen to find a guy where you're Zach Parise, your Ryan Suters, who you're going to have to pay that price tag to get him to come to a place like Minnesota. It comes in the draft. It comes in either drafting these players yourself or trading within a trade like a Nick Bjugstad trade and picking up a Kalen Addison, in a Jason Zucker trade or that sort of thing. That's where it comes from. It comes from developing players and developing them in your system. I think about a guy like, for the Minnesota Wild, not to run off on a tangent here too much, but a guy like Mike Riley. Mike Riley for the Minnesota Wild was a guy that was coming up in a very defensive-oriented system for the Minnesota Wild. I know he didn't really pan out per se, but I thought Mike Riley, especially at the University of Minnesota, was one of the most offensively IQ gifted defensemen I've ever seen. But he played in a defensive structured system with Bruce Boudreau and didn't really get a chance to kind of prove that because he was such a defensive liability. What if you put him on a cup contending team like the Washington Capitals a couple years ago as a sixth defenseman, a guy who's kind of a Brad Hunt, a power play specialist, that sort of thing. So it's all about, you're developing guys to hope that they stick within your system. And that's what the Minnesota Wild are starting to do. Their pipeline looks all right for the first time in a couple of years. But the draft is really where you find your primo centerman. But right now, the Minnesota Wild need to fill that bottom six position at forward in some capacity, especially with the addition of Kirill Kaprizov. Holy smokes, this is a long answer, but that's a guy that you have to, he might jump in and score 20 goals. He might jump in and score 2 and really struggle, So you have to be aware of that eventuality, and hopefully both of those guys, Nick Bjugstad and Kaprizov, both catch lightning in a bottle and really send the Minnesota Wild on a fun journey next season.
And I think that's the concern, honestly, for Minnesota Wild fans, and honestly for Bill Guerin. I mean, and this is where the fans have a little bit of a point, and that is where you have now Kaprizov, who we know is a very gifted forward. Now, again, he hasn't skated one game in the NHL. He hasn't proven anything in this league yet, and I've said this before, I feel bad for him. He's walking into a situation where he's got almost the savior mark on his head. And I kind of feel like there's a lot too much pressure on this kid. I really do. But I do think it's important sooner than later to address that center ice position. Now, again, as a GM, you have to be smart, right? You can't just, hit fire your way to either a trade or a free agency acquisition. It has to be the right fit. You got to have a player that wants to be here. Right. And to your point for Mikko Koivu, again, Michael Russo of The Athletic, he outlined a conversation that appears that the Wild had approached Mikko Koivu, and it sounds like the team is moving forward without their longtime centerman. So, again, that's Michael Russo's reporting. It sounds like there was some sources involved from that were speaking on condition of anonymity. We don't know yet. Again, there's still plenty of time between now and December is what the hope is for the start of the 2020-21 season. So things could change. You never know. But, I definitely think there is a push to get a better centerman. It tops, either a number 1 or number 2. But make the right move. Don't make a move for the sake of making one.
Yeah, definitely. But if you're going to make a move, we're free labor. Speaking of free labor, as you had talked about, check us out at the HuskiesWarmingHousePodcast.com, at Twitter, Warming House Den. Follow us so we can give away these darn t-shirts, Nick. They're sitting in my house in a box. I want to send them to you people. We're also going to give away a hat, but we're not going to do it until we get to 300 followers, and that's where we need your help. So check us out, and we're going to be right back here, Nick, for episode 29 with a couple of women's hockey players, but that'll do it right here for episode 28 with Mike Gibbons. Nick, have a wonderful week, man. I know we tell our fans to have a great week, but you know what, Nick? Have a great week, man.
You too. I'm kind of weirded out because normally I get an opposite reaction from you, but stay nice and warm up there in North Dakota. I'm trying to be nice here. It's really hard. Enjoy your quarantine, even though in North Dakota, basically anytime you live out there, it's quarantined by default. So have a good one, LSLT fans. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week for episode 29.